Let everybody get settled for a moment. You know, we've got the webcam fired up. Welcome everyone around the world. I feel like Miss Sally. See all the smiling faces out there? I see Mark and I see Matt, all the M people. So my name's Tom Patterson. I'm the Chief Trust Officer for Unisys. I'm thrilled that you all were able to join us both here in the beautiful and historic National Press Club in Washington, D.C., the site of pretty much every major important news announcement in my lifetime and well beyond. So we're thrilled to have the 2019 edition of the Unisys Security Index revealed here among yourselves. And again, welcome to everybody out there on the broadcast. To get us started and set the frame of reference before we break the seal and go through, and we're not going to read it to you, don't worry, but go through some of the things that really, as a lifelong security guy, really struck me, and maybe we can add a little bit of perspective to the words on the page. But to get us started, we put together a little 2-minute video, so let's get that rolling. And there should be audio here. Should be louder audio here. So Matt is a ventriloquist. We're going to restart this with sound turned on this time. You know, this worked in warm-up. I'm just saying. All right, let's go see that ball game. Hey, let's get through the scanner. So welcome, everybody, to the 2019 Unisys Security Index big reveal.
More than 1 in 5 Americans have either canceled or considered canceling plans to attend large-scale events. That's one of the surprising findings in this year's Unisys Security Index.
A lot of people, because of the unfortunate situations that have occurred over the past couple of years, have a lot of concerns about their physical well-being when they're attending large events, especially those that are outdoors.
While 83% are concerned about a criminal attack causing physical harm at a large event, nearly as many are worried about someone stealing their personal data at those same events.
One of the things I think people like to do is they have these limited data plans. So if they can use free Wi-Fi, they don't have to worry about their data plans being taken. And you are really sacrificing your personal security and your cybersecurity if you do that.
The survey results also show a very large majority favor the use of biometric information, such as facial imaging or fingerprints, to make air travel more secure and convenient.
The respondents were very clear that they actually embrace the use of biometrics if it helps them. If that looking for that trade-off, does it really help their security? Does it really help them do something that they want to do? So using biometrics at the airport, using biometrics with your bank, they're very much in favor of using those.
Internet security as a whole remains the strongest area of concern among Americans. This year's overall U.S. index is the second highest in the survey's history and the highest among the industrialized nations surveyed. Globally, the security index reached the highest level in its history.
It's really attributable to 2 big factors. One, the political turmoil, the situation out there has everybody on edge, and we understand that. And that can be a good thing if people take better precautions, take better care, can save their lives, can save their identities, can save themselves a lot of problems. The second is so many news items where you see about this problem or that problem that are touching home. They see something at a concert and say, I go to concerts. They see something at a game, they say, I go to games. It's important that they take those life lessons that they're getting from other people's tragedies and turn them into their own personal safety.
So again, that gave you a quick overview, and what I want to do is spend a few minutes together going through what's inside the packet that you all have. So I'm going to ask my panelists to come up, Scott and Peter. We're going to go through some of the results that I found particularly interesting in this year's survey. But then we're going to ask 2 world-class, feet-on-the-street, real experts around one of the areas of the most interesting of the findings this year, and that is the concern around event security. So we're going to do a little deep dive with two experts in a minute, but ceremonial rip open. So I'm sure you all waited until I told you it was okay to do that. But again, we're thrilled to have the Unisys Security Index. If you don't know it, and shame on you for not knowing it, is really a unique thing in the world. It's the oldest, continuously longest running snapshot of consumer security sentiment globally. And we do this in a very rigorous, very scientific methodology. We do it consistently year over year over year. We do it in 13 countries around the world. We, every year, are able to not only see what's important then, but we're able to put it in a much larger global context. And you'll see as we go through the results that really affected us, you'll see why we think that is important, not only for us, but for our clients. You know, Unisys builds and operates some of the world's most important and most critical infrastructure globally, whether we're talking about air travel or power generation or healthcare or transportation, pretty much across the board. Unisys has been doing this for over a century. So we are very concerned not only with our clients, but with our clients' clients, the people that populate the free world that are looking for trust, that are looking for ways that they can rely on making sure the power is on and making sure they're safe here when whether they're online shopping or going to the big game. So we launched this in 2007. It's statistically significant, and you'll see in the detailed packet the methodologies that were used. So this is much more than asking a couple of leading questions and getting to an answer that we looked at. We really let the data drive the results. So that's why we have the reveal at a place as great as the National Press Club here in Washington, D.C., and we make a little bit of a drum roll for the big findings because it is something that we learn from. We do this not only, again, to help ourselves make sure that we're on the right track in order to support our clients, but we share this with the world freely and openly because we're trying to help our industry that we work in really take advantage of understanding where the concerns are vis-a-vis security in the real world. And that way we can make sure as an industry we're working to really address them in the most positive way. So let's dive right in. Just a quick, and again, this is not going to be a statistics class from college, but you'll see we've color-coded, unless you're in black and white, you'll see we've color-coded the 8 different threat areas that we ask about. And we ask questions in this area in a lot of different ways. But they roll up into these 8 categories, and they break down into 4 areas. So national, things around national securities, disasters, questions that sort of help understand the level of concern there. Financial security, always a big topic with everybody, whether you're talking about online or cyber or not. The internet, and the internet has changed dramatically. Think back to 2007. What did the internet look like to you in 2007? What did you use it for in 2007 versus how does it rule your life today? You really can't get away from the internet today. In 2007, you had the option of turning it off and just shutting down your computer. You really can't get away from it now. It's in your pocket, and it's telling you what to do, and you're following the directions. And whatever it says to do, most people do it. So it's really the internet category has changed dramatically over the life of this survey. And then finally, the personal security, whether you're talking about identity thefts online or personal safety from a physical attack. These are an area of concern that you'll see is certainly first and foremost on respondents' minds worldwide. So those are the areas of questioning that has taken place over this last year. The survey was done through 2018, and these are the results that we're for the first time now announcing to the world. So big result here. Globally, the line in blue there globally, that number, 175, represents the highest cumulative concern score for security worldwide in history. So you can see it trending up. It continues to trend up. The trend continues this year. So globally, counting all 13 countries that we did the survey in, including the United States, we are at the highest level of consumer concern for security. This is a finding from the Unisys Security Index in 2019 that really can't be missed. This is something that everyone needs to take into account, whether you make products and provide services like Unisys does, or wherever you are in the food chain, or if you are an average person that likes to shop online and go to concerts. This is this is everybody's concern. In red, you have the US numbers. We are at the second highest. We went up from last year in a trend that we think is going to continue. There was a spike 2 years ago that was a little bit higher. But you can see the level of security concern, both in the United States and worldwide, is something that needs to be addressed. And it's one of the reasons we like to bring in these two fellows here to talk about it, because they spend their lives working behind the scenes trying to make the world a safer place. And so they're going to share some of that insight to help you understand what goes into maybe lowering that score and having people be less concerned before the day is out. So 3 key findings. We're going to kind of do the drum roll please version of the Hollywood style of the reveal. So we'll do them in reverse order. So number 3, as we just talked about, the U.S. had the highest security concerns among all 7 of the developed nations that we surveyed worldwide. So developed nations, we use the UN category of $12,000 per capita income as the average. And so there's 7 countries in the survey that rank that. The U.S. Respondents had the highest level of concern among all 7 of those. So that's something that we felt was important to call out. And as you can see here in the chart, you'll see the developed nations on the running from the U.S. down to the Netherlands, which had the lowest level of reported concern this year. And it was the lesser developed countries to the other side, capped by the Philippines' score of 234, where the security index was the highest. And so you can see that there's some correlation there between where you rely on technology, how embedded technology is into an organization, into a country, and then how much robustness has been put into the system. One of the things that some countries can afford to do is really focus on the concept of resilience, which is a corollary to security. Security is a thing that we provide, but resilience is something that says, hey, bad things can happen in the world. We see it in the headlines every day. What do we do to recover from that? How can we build resilience into the systems? So you can see a little more resilience in the developed countries where they can afford it better can go a long way towards lowering the overall level of concern. So Philippines still ranked the highest worldwide. Netherlands ranked the lowest, but both were trending up. So you can see year over year, and the detailed facts are in the actual report that you all have now. These are all numbers on the rise. And that's something that is an important takeaway from the 2019 index results. So that was, drum roll, you didn't do the drum roll. That was the third most influential, to me, standout type of result that I read, that I saw when I read the whole results. And we've been poring over the data for the past couple of months, trying to slice it and dice it in ways that's useful for people. And we provided a bunch of charts that are available both in your packet and online at unisys.com/USI. There's a lot more depth, so if you're into the data analytics side of this, you can slice and dice it your own way. These are the Unisys findings and interpretations of the results. So number 3, the U.S. had the highest security concerns among the 7 developed nations. Number 2, and this continues and actually builds on the result from last year, is U.S. respondents had strong support for using biometrics at the airport. This is something that did not register at all just a couple of years ago. And now, again, same rigorous methodology used for the survey, but now we're seeing an overwhelming amount of U.S. respondents that want to use biometrics at the airport. And that's something that I think is an important lesson. There's the old wives' tales from back in the day about, oh no, there's going to be a black market for cutting off thumbs, and we don't want to use that. But now, with our phones, we've gotten used to using, first fingerprints and then, facial recognition. People are getting used to using biometrics in a positive way, and they see that. Everybody travels, and they interact with biometrics in a way that they notice in an airport every time they travel. So we found that was a really interesting concern. Here's some of the reasons that they gave for being pro. So I know it's small print, so I'll just highlight some of the key ones. They think using biometrics will make their trip safer. They think it will deter terrorism. They think that biometrics is more secure than showing a paper or plastic license that could be Xeroxed. And I would tell you that Unisys agrees with all three of those perceptions. They are all true. Over a third of them, or I guess exactly a third of them, said they think that the authorities in the airports should know this stuff. They trust the airports and the people that work at the airports with their biometric identities. And again, everybody likes to speed through. Nobody likes those long lines. And I'll tell you, I've been using biometrics at airports throughout the world for the past 5 or 6 years. My line is always shortest, and we fly through. So if you don't like the lines, it's another reason we think people really like biometrics in airports. We also asked a lot about, where else would you like to see things like facial recognition? And I thought that was interesting too. Certainly the largest result was we liked facial recognition at airports. And I don't know if Scott, if you're going to talk a little bit about that, but there's a lot of facial recognition that goes on in the world today. Some by governments, some by commercial businesses, some in shopping malls, some in cameras on the streets. But there is a lot of that. But they see it at the airports, and they interact with that. But almost a third wanted to use it at voting stations. If they think, hey, if it IDs me positively at the airport, maybe we could use that to help with the integrity of our voting. Banking transactions. Hey, this is my money. I'm concerned about my money. I want to know where that is. Also, almost a third. Hey, let's use this at large public gatherings. If there's a way to screen out terrorists or people that are having furtive behavior, which is a thing now that software can help with, let's use that. Almost a third of the people were for that. And then less so, about a quarter of them said, let's have it out of the streets and help defend ourselves. So there's a lot going on with the use of biometrics, first and foremost at the airport, but then growing support in other areas where it helps them, where they perceive a real security benefit. Where they didn't like it was where it was just consumerism. Hey, they didn't want to have biometrics used to sell them the latest WYSIWYG thing. So that was clear, is they will accept biometrics, but if it's for their safety and security. Number three, the top one that I found the most interesting, and the reason we asked these two gentlemen to come talk to us, because they're both experts in event security, is we found more than a fifth of the American respondents have canceled or considered canceling plans to attend large-scale events. This never registered on our survey in the past, and now it's over 20%. I think it's 22% was the respondent level for this. This is a big, dramatic change. This is a huge spike in the personal security. And honestly, what we're seeing here, and if I had a single takeaway for you, I would say that what this survey taught me was what we've been working for at Unisys and the industry has been working towards at large over the past few years, now must come together. Physical security and cybersecurity are coming together. They're becoming security. They're becoming one thing that people are concerned about. And that one thing, that combination of physical security and cybersecurity, is now part of our national security. You'll see these things and who the bad actors are involved in this stuff. It's no longer just somebody picking your pocket or taking your identity. The combination of physical security and cybersecurity is resulting in a threat to our national security. So that's the number one finding that the respondents taught us here. You can see some of the numbers. Americans have canceled or considered canceling their plans. 22% at some level are considering that or have considered that in the past year. That did not happen before, and it's happened now. Physical and cybersecurity coming together. Again, 80%, over 80% in both categories for physical security and cybersecurity. Whether we're talking at a festival for music, We're talking about what's going on now. We've got Women's World Cup underway now. We've got the finals underway in both basketball and hockey. There's summertime concerts in every town in America right now. Over 80% are concerned with both their physical security and their cybersecurity at these events. This needs to be looked at holistically. This needs to be addressed holistically. Companies like Unisys need to bring together the physical security, the cybersecurity capabilities that they have, and make sure they get there all the way to the end user. And that's something that Unisys has certainly taken to heart with these findings this year. That's why we made it our #1 finding. It's something that we really wanted to share the impact with the rest of the world, the rest of the community, because it is something that is, we find very, very important. So with that, I ask you to fully dive into the results of the survey yourselves. Like I said, you can slice and dice the numbers any way you like, but those 3 findings that we found, we thought were just the most noteworthy for the group here, the National Press Club, and then at large on the webcast and beyond. So we want to move into the second phase of this, and we're going to do questions at the end, but we want to move into the second phase of this. And so we've asked 2 of the brightest guys I know in event security, since that was the #1 finding we had this year. Last year, the #1 result was around election security. And so we had your director, Chris Krebs, come out. Actually, what he talked about a lot was, hey, we need this new thing called CISA. and now, in fact, we've created that. Lots happened just in that past year. But this year, with the finding being around event security, I really felt it was important to get people that are not just book smart on event security, but are on the ground smart and experienced about event security. There's a lot of cyber people that don't cross over. I come out of the intelligence communities. I've lived in some bad places in the world, so you kind of take physical security as part of your training. But a lot of cyber folks start with the ones and zeros and end with the ones and zeros. These 2 folks do not. So let me introduce Scott Brer from Department of Homeland Security. He works in the new CISA group. I'll let him talk to you about it. It's less than a year old, right? So, yes. And going strong. CISA is chartered by the administration to focus specifically on the defense of our cyber and critical infrastructure in the country. And we, believe it or not, did not have a particular agency-level group whose sole mission was that until last year. And it's something that Unisys has been very strong and vocal in support of the creation of. I think the right people, career people, as well as appointees, really hit the ground running. You've had a great success last year around election security. I know that's continuing on as the 2020s cycle already seems to have begun. But Scott, you particularly, I know, have an event security background, and you can bring a lot, I think, to the table. So can I ask you to just give a little bit more background on yourself, talk a little bit about CISA, and then tell everybody, talk a little bit about some of the areas that you want to express around event security today.
Sure. Thanks, Tom. And after your presentation, a little bit of doom and gloom set in. I'll try to be Mr. Sunshine.
And that's what we
it's you want. That's what you want. As Tom said, I'm with the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, and yes, we were just formed in November of 2018. But prior to that, we were the National Protection and Programs Directorate, which had pretty much 90% the same mission.
You didn't have the cool name.
Yeah, I didn't have the cool name. And that's to work with owners and operators of critical infrastructure to enhance their security and resilience. So first you have to ask yourself, so why is CISA involved in large-scale events? Well, if you think about critical infrastructure, and I know Sunday was a rainy day, so you probably woke up and broke out your National Infrastructure Protection Plan and started reading it. There's a sentence in there that defines critical infrastructure as those assets that underpin American society. So our perspective of what critical infrastructure is what is critical to that community. If you went to Pittsburgh, they'd probably say the Tree of Life Synagogue. If you went to Parkland, Florida, they would say Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. So for the last 10 years, we've been working with communities to ensure that they are safe and secure. We actually have folks within the regions doing this work. But because of that, we're involved in those large venues, in the planning and security. So I'm going to speak to some things that are really DHS at large, and some things that are specific to the control of our agency within Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. The first item that I think is critical, and I can't say that the respondents to your survey were informed in this manner, but it's the National Terrorism Advisory System, a way to communicate what the concerns and threats that we have really as an interagency family. And the latest bulletin that is up now speaks to the risk at public venues and speaks to the challenge and threat environment that we live in. So to me, it's positive that I'm seeing these numbers, because then I know that people are understanding that there is a dynamic threat environment and they need to be concerned. And to me, a concerned citizen is an aware citizen, and if they're aware, then they can actually be a force multiplier with respect to security by identifying suspicious activities and actually taking an active role in that. The second program that we have that I think is very important to large venues is our special events program. This program is over 10 years old. And last year we collected from the state submissions over 16,000 special events. And they have a tiered methodology that they go through. So this is everything from that is being submitted to the Department of Special Event, from the Super Bowl to, if you go out to Delaplane, Virginia, the Delaplane Strawberry Festival. It covers the spectrum. So therefore we have to tier these facilities because the security and engagement of federal, state, and local officials is going to vary from the Super Bowl to the Strawberry Festival. So that special events program, Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, is actually a voting member on the Special Events Working Group, along with our DHS Ops, FEMA, Secret Service, and the FBI. So after it goes through the tiering methodology, our co-chairs get together, and then we decide that, yes, Super Bowl is the top tier. That's what we need to focus on, all the way down. And the states are input these each year, and the program is set up whereas other special events come along during the year. They can go ahead and be submitted, and they can be submitted by the state, or they can be submitted by a federal partner. So if you're FBI SAC, out in Phoenix, Arizona, is now made aware of an event, it hasn't been submitted, he or she could submit it, and then the co-chairs would take a look at that. So that brings a lot, because it coordinates the federal family in bringing resources to those events. The third item for the department is the Support Anti-Terrorism by Fostering an Effective Technology Act, or SAFETY Act. That limits liability to those venues that are putting in technologies, programs to mitigate the risk of terrorism. Or what I consider, being on the security side, we're pretty much agnostic to the motivation. It's the terrorist tactics, techniques, and procedures that we want to mitigate. And we see a lot of sports venues going for SAFETY Act designation. And it's not just limited to your venues. Basically, hospitals could do it, anybody that wanted to go down there. But that shows you they're meeting a standard with respect to security measures, which I think is positive. And then with our control that we have within CISA is, as you're reading the National Infrastructure Protection Plan on Sunday, it would speak to how we coordinate with the private sector, and with that we have what we refer to as sector coordinating councils, where it's made up of private sector representatives. And we are the sector-specific agency for commercial facilities. So commercial facilities, these large type venues fall within that, and actually within that sector, we have a sports league subsector. So we work every day hand in glove with the major sports leagues and talking to them about security measures and developing products. For example, last week we just rolled out a new product to do bag checks. You know, you can't just do a bag check a certain way. You might miss something. If it's not standardized and rehearsed, there's effective ways of doing that. So we worked with the sports leagues to draft that publication and put it out. We also have a publication that's been out for a couple of years that's embraced by the stadiums, and that's cybersecurity for stadiums best practices. So because of that relationship, that partnership that we have with the representatives of these large venues, we're able to produce these type of products, work with them, and address the security gaps. I mentioned that we have a field presence. At the tip of the spear, actually on the engagement side of the venues, we have protective security advisors. They are in all 50 states and in Puerto Rico, and we also have cybersecurity advisors. You talked about the convergence of physical and cyber. So at these venues, these cybersecurity advisors, the protective security advisors, will work with the venue operators to ensure that they're safe and secure. And lastly, you know, in closing, because I know my time is limited. You know, when I read your report, you know, at first, you know, granted, you know, I was concerned that people out there, you know, feel this way, that they have to change their plans, because the last thing we want is for them to change their plans, which is why I agreed to come here, because I think it's important that they hear and understand all the work that is going on to ensure that those venues that they attend are safe and secure. If you think about like a duck on a pond, you know, that venue is the duck that you see. What you don't see are the legs underneath that are going 100 miles an hour. And that's all the security professionals, both federal, state, local, private sector, working together, working as partners to ensure that the people that attend those venues are safe and secure. And our end goal is that they have a positive experience. That's what we work towards.
And that is why we asked you to come here for exactly that message. I really appreciate you sharing that with everybody, Scott. A couple of takeaways I just heard. You know, a lot goes on to ensure the security behind the scenes. You know, people may see the metal detectors, they may see a camera up on a stanchion, but they don't see the layer after layer, the training that goes on. So that was one takeaway there that I heard from you loud and clear, Scott. Second was the amount of coordination that takes place. Just like elections, it's not just one person's in charge. There's many layers to event security, going from private sector all the way up to the administration, so and everything in between. And so you spend a great deal of effort, you and collectively CISA, spend a great deal of effort coordinating that. You said there's a lot of material that has been created just in the last couple of years. You know, Unisys and I worked on the security of the Super Bowl that was in Santa Clara, Super Bowl 50. And to me, that was an amazing amount of coordination. Then I saw what happened went on in Atlanta this year. It's like, wow, has the game really been stepped up in terms of all the different parts of the government working together and handoffs? So really good story there around what goes on behind the scenes to maybe lower that score in people's minds once they hear about it from a talk like you just gave us. But also understanding the level of coordination that happens and the amount of resources that are available to anybody that's in that supply chain of event security.
And that's a good point. All of our programs, a lot of times I'll go and speak somewhere, and then during a Q&A I'll get a question, how much does this cost? It costs nothing. We're a public service. Everything that we do is volunteer. So the resources that I speak to, the guide for doing bag checks, our active shooter training, which is now in 9 languages, all of that is free and available online. You can go just type in hometown security, and it'll take you to an area which you can find all that.
At the DHS website.
At DHS.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Scott. Let me turn to my friend Peter, who has worked on probably one of the largest event security issues in the world. Peter is a director at G4S, which is the people you call if your office building is about to be stormed by terrorists. He can dispatch a team faster than people can blink an eye. Peter's got a really cool background. He was the regional security officer for the State Department at the U.S. Embassy in Caracas until just recently. And trust me, buy him a beer. There's some stories in this man's head.
2 beers.
But also as part of his role, he was the overall United States security coordinator for the Olympics held in Rio de Janeiro. And with that came a wealth of not only experience that you brought to the table, but that you took away from that table. And so I just asked Peter to come and talk to us for a few minutes, just an overview on some of the things that go into large event security in your expertise, and then maybe some things that people can do to better protect themselves. So
Sure.
let me turn it over to you.
I like Scott's analogy about the duck. I was one of those guys under the duck working hard, so I do appreciate it. Worked very hard on that. First, I'd like to say thank you to Unisys for the invitation to talk about a topic that interests me, event security. I was down in Rio, like you said, for almost 2 years planning for the Olympics. And what interests me with the
Is that a hardship post?
It's a medium.
Okay.
I went to Venezuela after that, but it's another issue. But what's interesting is on your survey, you talked about 22% of your respondents talked about either switching or thinking about switching to go to a large event where there's a large amount of people. And I want to lay some of those fears and some of the training and the discussion and the planning that goes on the backside of that. And I'll use my examples from my time down in Rio de Janeiro. But if let's say World Cup in France right now, or Rio de Janeiro, Brazil with the Olympics, the host country is actually hosting these Olympics or World Cup. They don't want anything to happen when they're there. So what they do is they put a lot of time, a lot of resources in the security planning. It goes on years ahead of time. And so when I was down in Rio, the first thing we started looking for was information gathering for threats against the venue. And the way the Brazilians did it was different than the way it was done before, because the Brazilian security officials said, okay, we've got a security apparatus, intelligence apparatus, to try to go out there and find what threats are against the venue. Well, they said, okay, we're just one country, Brazil. Well, they said, okay, let's go ahead and see what other countries want to send police officers to the Olympics to help out with something called the International Police Coordination Center. 33 different countries answered the call. And it was very interesting because they're all federal police. We had diplomatic security, FBI, federal police officers in the same room with Russian, Chinese, Iranian police officers, North Korean police officers, all in there. And what they were doing is they were going back to their respective countries, trying to pull that intelligence, any kind of threat they found out against the Olympics in Rio. It was all brought into one center. It was the first time they've done it. My hat's off to the Brazilian security officials. They've done it. I have a feeling they'll do it in the upcoming Tokyo Olympics next summer. It was a great way to do it. The USA did a front page article. It was a great way strategically to bring that information in. And so they pushed it out also to the police officers protecting the different venues out there. So that's from the strategic point of view. From the more tactical point of view from the United States, we in the consulate, and the consulate was in Rio, the embassy was actually up in Brasilia. But what Scott was talking about before, using the whole approach of government. We had 8 different federal agencies that came down. We had a joint operations center running in the consulate 24/7 with reach back here to the United States if we needed it. And so we had also the Brazilian police, because if we had information, we gave it to the Brazilian police. We also found out that the Brazilian military was really involved in the Olympics, so we brought them in also. So we had those different groups in there. It was a very good operations center for exchange of information. And I also want to highlight 2 different things, because I want to sort of talk to that 22% that are, get nervous about going to these large events. We have consular officers in there. So, going overseas, traveling overseas, being overseas, and I've spent a majority of my career overseas, it's very difficult. When something happens overseas to you, it's a lot worse than it is stateside. And so what we have is these consular officers in there. If you get sick, really sick, if you get a car accident, you lose your money, you lose your passport, that information was on our website. It would come into the center, and we'd give it to the consular officer, and they were able to help those American citizens. Also, we have something called the OSAC, Overseas Security Advisory Council. There's probably a lot of folks out there that are listening to this that are members of OSAC. They would be in there. They helped out U.S. sponsors, and the sponsors that come down, let's say, for example, Coke or Visa, they bring down thousands of people. And it's a big time for them to sort of give back to the people that have helped them out in their business. So they come down, and with OSAC, we provide information, we push them, security information, we push to all these different groups, as well as to OSAC constituents. And there's briefings that are given out in the morning. If there's any kind of incident, criminal, traffic, anything like that, that's pushed out. So that's pushing out the information to the different groups. And it's all, of course, unclassified, but it's, it's sometimes a little bit sensitive. And then we also get information back. So if there's an American citizen or an OSAC constituent that has an incident happen to them, or they hear about something, they bring it back, we tell the Brazilian police, and that's the information sharing that's needed back and forth. So that's even the individual citizens can help on that if they find something, they can bring it back to that. And then number two is in terms of the training for the security professionals that are responsible for the venue security. In Brazil, when we got down there, the Brazilians are very good about large events. During New Year's Eve, they have over 2 million people on the Copacabana beach. They've had the Pope there. They've had the World Cup there. They're great in that. But then there's other things that we, the United States, we helped out for the Olympics. They really never had a big golf tournament down there. There is some golfing down there, but there's not that big of golfing. So they came to me, and I said, sure. We went up to I brought the top echelon of the security professionals responsible for the Olympics. I brought them up to a PGA tournament, showed them the behind the scenes, how we in the United States protect golfing events, which really helped them out a lot. They went to the Boston Marathon after the bombing, a couple years after, and they saw how we were able to secure a marathon, which is very difficult. And also we brought them up, they went to the Super Bowl with the FBI, and they were able to take a look at how that worked. And we also brought them up to the United Nations General Assembly up in New York City, because they also had a big operations center up there, as you can imagine, besides a different international police center, and they wanted some ideas. And they went to other countries also, just not to the United States, to find these ideas. But we brought them up to the NYPD Joint Operations Center up there, which is, I don't know if you haven't been there, you have a chance to go. It's really a sort of the premier operations center that I've been to in my career. 80 different agencies were there. And so we brought the Brazilians in, and we showed them, how they were looking at the drone threat, how they were looking at different kind of threats up there. And they had an idea of that. And it was interesting, a little side note, the NYPD lieutenant that was running it now runs the G4S office up in New York City, Joe Falco, and I have a chance to reminisce with him about how he hosted us during that time. So we helped them out in terms of that training. And then also in terms of concentric rings of security. People think they just show up and they get to the gate and they get in with their ticket. Well, during these big events, there's a whole bunch of stuff like you were talking about, Scott. They try to push it out as far as they can from the venue site. Let's say we're going to a track and field. You're not at the World Cup or at the Olympics, you're not going to be able to drive up there. Now they have VIP buses, they have maybe VIP cars, et cetera, but they're all swept outside the venue, which is good. Because you have to worry about vehicular terrorism, you have to worry about car bombs, things like that. So they don't want any sort of cars that haven't been swept near the venue. And then they'll have a police officer go back and forth with the buses, so they're bringing people back and forth. And if you're coming, usually it's via subway to the event. And when you get on the subway, what we did in Rio, because we wanted to make sure that the people coming to the event were people that were going to the event. So they have to buy their tickets online. And we'll talk a little bit about that. You're talking about some of the cyber issues, some of the
combination there.
The combination, because there's a lot of bad tickets out there. But before you got on the metro, you had to show your ticket. And there were police officers on the metro. There were a lot of undercover folks on there. So those people actually went to the venue, they got up, and then when they started walking, of course you're talking about the video in the subways, they got video. I don't want to say if they're using facial recognition, but I think it's going to be a thing of the future at all these big events. And when they get up there and they're walking to the gates, there's a lot of these, we call them soft checks, because you just want to make sure that the people are there, are the people that are going to go to the event, and the people that don't want to do good things there sometimes get a little nervous, and there are certain patterns that people can observe. So we call it a soft check. It might be a person, a security officer, who's sort of like an ambassador, also very gregarious and asking for people for their tickets and seeing if there's any help, et cetera, et cetera. And that's sort of also a subtle check coming in, but a very important check. Yes. And then you have a lot of undercover folks that I talked about before. As you get closer to the entrance, you may have bomb-sniffing dogs. You'll have other video apparatus to see sort of what's going on. And then you have the metal detectors. And then once you get in, if there were an incident, they have, of course, crisis management plans. They have quick reaction forces that are there. They have a lot of first aid type stations throughout the places. And of course, they have a lot of other video cameras throughout the place. So there's this whole concentric rings of security that we like to, you want to do it as far out as possible. Even during Brazil, we had sort of a watch list, and all the different countries provided what they could to the Brazilians. And there were some folks that actually got off the plane, and the Brazilians were there, and we had folks that turned them right around.
Good.
And that helps out a lot, so that sort of pushes it out. Now, so for the folks that are going there, the 22%, they're probably saying, okay, what can I do individually? Because that's their next question. If I were they, I would say the same thing. Well, in Brazil, the Brazilians had this website, and they had a whole list of things you can and cannot do at the stadium, things you can bring, things you can't bring. And you really have to look at that ahead of time. And then if you go to the stadium, it's sort of interesting, you know, well, I hope nothing's going to happen. The probability nothing's going to happen, and that is true. Mm-hmm. But there is certain things that you can do, because hope is not a strategy.
Please.
And I just remember that. Hope is not a strategy. So when you get there, just sort of look where the exits are. Look for your surroundings. Look at, okay, if there were an incident, what am I going to do? Now, don't take away from your time at the Olympics or the track and field we were talking about. Enjoy yourself. But I also like to use the analogy. I'm a big baseball guy. I'm a New York Mets guy. Not a Yankees guy. I'm a Mets guy. Maybe that 10% of New York. But if I go to the baseball game, you know, they put up the netting all the way up to third base now, you know, right around to the dugout area. If I'm on the left side, right beyond the netting, and I have my son or daughter who's maybe 10 or 12 years old, and they're all excited, they got their glove, I'm not going to sit on the left side of them. I'm going to sit on the right side of them, because there's that 1/10 of, 1,000% that a foul ball might be hit to the kids, and they have no idea. They're not going to catch it. So bring your glove, participate with your kids, and sit on that side just for that, that 1/10 of 1%. So they can take some active, different aspects for their safety.
So you went from the global fusion center of all the world's police forces down to bring your glove to protect your kids at the ball game.
There are certain things you could do.
Good thing in 10 minutes. Thank you very much, Peter. You hopefully detected a little bit of a theme here. So just as Scott talked about, Peter has now echoed, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. Maybe now that we know that the fear is there and rising, maybe we as practitioners should do a little bit more to show some of those layers without compromising them, but to sort of make people more aware of some of those other layers that are underway. You also heard the secondary theme, I believe equally important theme of coordination, whether it's in your world or your world globally with the Olympics. Coordination has been key, and we see that in fusion centers popping up around the country, where not only the state and local law enforcement officers get together, but you also bring in private security and physical security people and cybersecurity people, all sort of coming together. So that concept of coordination, that concept of a lot going on behind the scenes in these layers are two hopefully big takeaways. We have a couple minutes left, and I've got two really smart dudes here. If I can pepper you with a little bit more detailed questions. So one of the things that Unisys wanted to convey here was, chill, calm down.
Absolutely.
We see the fear is the highest it's ever been, but let's talk about this. Statistically, you're good, but if things happen, there are things you can do. So can we talk for a couple minutes? So you started the ball rolling with the bring your mitt to the game, but can we talk about a few things? You've got what to do in terms of an active shooter that I think hasn't really registered with most people. Can you give us just a minute or two on some things that somebody could do to prepare themselves better in the case of a bad thing happening at their venue?
Sure. And I referenced some material that we have. The most popular that is looked at is our active shooter training and also suspicious activity training. And when I think about the participants that go and attend these venues, Those are the two training modules that I think anyone should review and have awareness of. Active shooter, us in the federal government, we have the run, hide, fight. That is not sequenced. You react to the scenario, the situation. But it gets you thinking, as you pointed out, you walk into a room, where is the signage with respect to exits? And I mentioned the suspicious activity behavior. If you think about the participants, like now we're midway through June going into July, it's going to be pretty hot and humid, at least in the DC area. If you're going in the video, you had the Nats. If you go into a Nats game and someone's walking up, with a jacket on, that would be a bit suspicious, But what's critical now is in the department we have see something, say something, and we always say that's not a slogan. That's an action step. So if you're an owner and operator of a venue and you're going to have see something, say something type signage, you have to have the steps for the patrons to take. A lot of times when we get engaged with, when I mentioned the special events that are submitted, the lower tiered special events that don't necessarily have a security professional, they'll have signage like that, but they won't necessarily have, so what are the action steps?
Right.
Who do I contact?
And some of that's on the individuals. And they can
it's-
decide to engage themselves. Kind of like when you're riding an airplane, you sit in the exit row. You can ignore those 30 seconds and not figure out how to open the door. But I'm telling you, when that cabin is filled with smoke and you need to get out, it would be nice to have spent a few seconds learning how that particular door opens.
Yeah, and that's a good point. When we engage these venues, on the flip side of that, we always ask, have you been in contact with law enforcement, especially in your security planning? Many times they have not.
Yeah.
The last thing you want is the first responders, law enforcement come into your facility, your open air venue, in response to an incident.
All right, let me ask one more free question real quick, and then we'll open it up to the room. So we talked about countermeasures. We talked about some of those layers. Technology is playing an increasingly important role in those layers right now. Whether it's on the cyber side, if people are going to go to a coffee shop, they should use a VPN, or their company should provide microsegmentation or something to really lock that down to make that a safe experience. The same goes true for event security. That there's a lot of technology. There's now software that watches those cameras, looking for that furtive behavior, looking for someone that is wearing that overcoat in a hot day, or somebody that's trying to avoid camera angles. That's all done by, not all done, but it's augmented by a lot of great technology. Can you talk about the role you saw just a couple years ago in Rio that technology played in the defense?
So I agree with your survey in terms of 2/3 or 3/4 saying that facial recognition biometrics is, I'm for that because I think it does provide for a safer venue. I think it is going to be coming for the future if we like it or not. I think it's like you said in your opening statements that it's sort of crawling, now we're walking. It does help event security. And my concern, of course, is, and we helped out the Brazilians on this also in terms of technology, from the threat is the drones. There's some issues out there, and I believe we're working to mitigate that as much as possible, the federal government and other actors. But also you're talking about just some of the cyber stuff. When you have these big events, especially overseas, if you come in and you use your credit card trying to get local money at the airport, it's probably not a good idea. So what you want to do is get money ahead of time, get some small American dollars if you could switch that back and forth. But we had a really huge issue with that. And you got some of the criminal gangs in terms of, they have targets of opportunity, and you go down there and they might even figure out who's coming in and actually go after him or her.
Yeah, and you make a good point, and we're running tight here, but we talk about coordination on the good guy side and why it's so imperative to our success collectively. The bad guys are very coordinated. Organized crime, the key word now is organized. These folks are not, Dillinger with his Tommy gun anymore. These are as organized as any, Harvard-educated Silicon Valley startup. These guys come and go, like clockwork. They know exactly what they're doing, and so we have to be on our game. I see, Nick, you've got a microphone there. Does anybody have a question from the floor?
Thanks.
You can identify yourself first, Miriam.
Yeah, Mariam Baksh from Inside Cybersecurity. I was hoping that you could talk a little bit more about what exactly the event hosters are looking to get liability protections for under Safety Act. And you mentioned hospitals are doing this too. What's the technology that they're looking to get covered by Safety Act here?
Well, the Safety Act covers technologies, but it also covers the implementation of those technologies. So it's not necessarily specific to a certain technology, but you're talking about various protective measures, layered security that venues can put in place. So if you go for Safety Act designation, for example, they're going to monitor and see how you actually execute if you use wand-type magnetometers, how you do that, because you have to meet their standard, their level of standards to get that designation, or you can pursue another level, which is certification. So it covers the spectrum of security measures. It's not specific to a technology, but it's just the implementation of technologies for security.
Multiple technologies could could form or could be assessed toward granting certification, including biometrics or whatever else.
Anybody else?
Hi, Brandy Vincent from NextGov. As we talk more and more about how facial recognition and emerging technologies are used to protect, do you think we're going to get to a place where the only option to enter these sort of big events is through facial recognition or other emerging technology? And it'll get to a point where it's like the haves and the have-nots. So if you don't agree to give up sort of your personal recognition, you can't enter it? Or do you think that we're going to continue to have these legacy options to get in as well?
So I guess
well, let's look at how the airport works today. You can choose to go in the very long line and pull out your paper license, or you can choose to fly through with me and just go whoop.
I can tell you the large venues, and as I said in my opening remarks, the number one priority is that experience, and they want it to be a positive experience. So every day they're making decisions. They're making the decisions based on, well, what is the experience of the individual going through that? So, and with that, there's trade-offs, because we're trying to mitigate the vulnerabilities on security, but then we also understand that if you go into a certain event, you want expectations, like you can get through the ticketing line in a timely manner, et cetera. So it's a fine balance.
Well, listen, I want to thank everybody for coming. I point out in the room we have the Unisys Chief Information Security Officer, Matt Newfield, and also our Global Vice President for Public Sector Business around the world, who's got a wealth of experience in all the rest of the countries of the planet, and Mark Foreman here, also available to answer any questions. But with that, please join me in thanking our two guests, Peter and Scott. And I encourage everybody to go back online at unisys.com/USI, Unisys Security Index, USI, and read the data for yourselves, and follow up online with any questions or comments you may have. We'll all be available to you because, again, our goal was to help the sector really make sure we stay on target, to help the people, especially around event security, understand a little bit more that what is going on to protect them, and understand a few things that they can do. I encourage you to go to the DHS site and really take a little time to read some of the great things that have been prepared for everybody. There's a lot you can do, take some personal responsibility, and really you can enjoy those events that much better. So thank you all for coming. We think this is a great survey result, and we'll be around to talk about it going forward. Thank you.